Now, before you turn that wheel like that, make sure you've got your back tires blocked up well, the emergency brake on, and something, I like to put a little extra safety on here for the jack, so I put the tire underneath the car there, just under the frame. So we want to remove this bolt and this one so we can get this caliper off. Alright, you may not need WD-40 or something like, but I'm going to go ahead and spray it on these. You want to let that set in for 15 minutes if you're having trouble getting these bolts off. But number 14 millimeter socket along with a 3/8 inch drive. Just be careful of the brake line itself coming down to the calipers. You don't want to damage that. Just going to loosen these two bolts that's holding the caliper to the disc. So you have to take these bolts out all the way to remove the caliper from the disc itself. Once you have those bolts out of there, all I have to do is use a hammer and lightly tap right there where you took the bolt out, and that caliper will come off of there, or the caliper assembly. Be sure you're bracing that as you take it off. You don't want to mess up your brake line coming down here. It's rather fragile. Get that lower one off as well. And then just set this in here. You don't want to just let it dangle. You want to set it up there somewhere where it's not going to damage your brake line coming down to it. You don't want to have any tension on this line whatsoever. And then we can take these brake shoes off. Just take a flathead screwdriver and carefully push these brake pads and shoes out away from the disc, nice and easy. This brake pad, there's nothing left on it at all. It's just started. I heard it making a grinding sound, and I'm glad I got to it right away here. I don't have to worry about replacing that disc. So you just wedge it in here on the back side and it'll pop it right out of there. Once you get it worked out a ways, you can always use your hammer if you need to. Just lightly tap on it. Now it comes. Save the clips. Just work it off of the disc itself. If the brake pad's giving you a little bit of trouble coming off of there, just work the pad in and out lightly. Hammer it in and then pry it out using your screwdriver or a claw hammer. Just be careful not to damage the brake disc. There's a little bit of pad left on there, but you want to save these clips that are in there. Most brake pad replacements don't come with these clips, so save those clips. Alright, here's some new brake pads, and they're both the same size and are exactly the same. First thing you want to do is take that little plate off of there. You want to put on some of this lubricant. Doesn't take much. Just spread it around on there a little. Do that to both of them. The brake lubricant will cost you an extra $1 or $2. But if you have ever heard squeaky brakes, this will remedy that. They will offer it to you when you pick up your brake pads. And we're ready to put these back on. I like putting the outside one on first, and I usually put the bottom in and then try to get the top to go in. And I like to use the hammer, just lightly tap it in. Make sure you don't do any damage to those clips. There's one right into place. Let's put this back side in. That one slipped right in there real nice. This is called a dual disc brake pad spreader. And when you get your new brake pads from your favorite auto parts store, be sure you get one of these. And it goes on loan, so you have to pay for it, and then you get your money back after you complete the work and take the tool back over to your favorite auto parts store. If you don't have one of these, you need some C-clamps. Alright, I'm going to do a little narrative here because I'm going to have to move this camera and make it a tooth cam. But this is going to go inside of the piston, and you brace it. It's going to brace up against the caliper, and then we're going to go ahead and just tighten this down. Alright, I've got the tool in place, and we're going to push the pistons back into the caliper. I've got it pretty much centered up on the piston, and we just need to crank it down there, and it slowly pushes those pistons back into the caliper. Let's do it. Make sure that piston's pushed in there all the way. If it starts getting tough to twist, your C-clamp or this piston pusher, you've got it in all the way. But those pistons need to be back inside the calipers all the way, or it's not going to fit onto the new pads and disc. Once you know you got those pistons in there all the way, you can go ahead and release your C-clamp or your piston pusher. Be sure to tap in these set bolts. They travel in and out of the caliper framework, and you've got to push those in order to get the caliper assembly and pistons back onto over the brake pads. That went on there real nice. Just make sure you push these bolt pins back into the caliper frame assembly. Otherwise you'll never get the caliper back on there. Let's go ahead and put the bolts back on. 14mm socket, tighten them down. So you have to hold that nut, the pin nut, so that you can put the back end tightly. That's all back together. Looks real good. Be sure to carefully pump those brakes so that those pistons come out of the caliper and start to grab onto your new brake shoes and pads. It'll feel like there's air in the line till those pistons come out and touch those new pads. Alright, I'm Chris with Atlantic Drain, reminding you, it's easy once you know how.